People will hear from people of all faiths are feeling the grassroots enthusiasm and insistence by people all across this nation that we respond to the environmental crisis. You hear a name like that, you know it comes right up out of the grassroots.
Jesus, hold my hand while I run this race. Jesus, hold my hand while I run this race.
Can't do nothing without Jesus. That's why we named Jesus, so we get some help. The main man up there will help us get some recognition. That's why we fund Jesus or Jesus.
The path is well worn, and though most have not traced these particular steps, they have made similar journeys of their own. In hundreds of communities, a factory operates in the middle of a neighborhood, and no one knows exactly what it makes.
Fence is right here.
Or how it operates.
That's all that separates us, is that fence right there. I didn't know anything, really. I thought they were just making, grinding stumps and stuff. That's what they were telling.
Well, we thought it would save, you know. We didn't have no trouble by staying here.
Columbia, Mississippi.
Close to this site, Superfund site.
Drop them in the hole and cover them up.
Otherwise, if you get that stuff on you, it would eat you.
Beginning in the 1930s, a corporation called Southern Naval Stores operated a factory on a 101-acre site in the middle of the city. The facility produced naval stores, rosin, turpentine, pine oil, and dipentine from tree stumps. In the early 1970s, the stump plant, as it had become known locally, was bought by Chempro International. In 1975, Reichhold Chemicals purchased the site and began to manufacture wood-preserving compounds made from pentachlorophenol mixed with diesel oil, as well as other products few in Columbia knew about.
We still were under the impression that this was a stump plant. We had no business with Reichhold.
And you look out the window, it'd be at night. You look out the window, there'd be a tractor be sitting out there digging. And I just ease up and go on out there in the backyard and stand there and watch them. They'd be digging away and burying the drums. And they'd cover it up before daylight and leave. And like nothing ever happened.
My operators told me that Mr. Susanoo directed them to bury drums with materials in it. I went out, too, with my equipment a little before the fire. We buried those drums. Deposition of George D. Bird, owner and operator of the George Bird Bulldozer Company, November 18th, 1986.
A small office fire in early 1976 alerted Dwight Wesley Jr., Columbia's new fire chief, that something different was going on at the Reichhold plant, something dangerous.
Well, there were numerous large tanks. I'm going to say 10,000-gallon tanks. I think they were either 7 or 10. In addition to several 100-gallon tanks, in addition to rows and rows and stacks of 55-gallon drums containing xylene, epichloride, formaldehyde, DMA. And from the results of this small fire, and with the size of the storage of all of this chemical, we became aware that this was a potential for a very large, hazardous problem area.
The problem became real at 9:30 a.m. one morning in early March 1977.
Beautiful morning, and out of a clear blue sky, this very large explosion. The sound was not that great, but the vibration was terrific. So I ran in the back door and hollered to all of the men to dress and turn out, and no sooner had I said this, the telephone started ringing, both phones, emergency phone and the regular phone. And we got the call that Reichhold had blown up.
It just blew all at once. I tell you, it was awful. There was flames and smoke everywhere. My house just shook off the block, broke the windows.
But we got out of here and we went down by Trinity Church. And that's where they told us to stay until we hear from them later on, so we did. And when we come back in here, it was just different when we come back because you could smell this stuff all over the place. It was up.
Under the direction of Fire Chief Dwight Wesley, over 100 Columbia and other area firefighters brought the fire under control. But the explosion and fire had so severely damaged the facility that soon afterward Reichhold abandoned the site. George Bird's company was hired to dispose of the large amount of abandoned chemicals.
After the explosion in March of 1977, I was called by Reichhold to clean up the dismantling of that facility. After the fire, there were more chemicals buried on that property. The warehouse burned and we started hauling off sacks of materials that had been water damaged. We hauled and buried stuff on the northeast side of the plant site, in the area of the big open field. Deposition of George Bird, November 18, 1986.
Well, when they start moving it, so a couple of sacks busted. They was just putting dirt on top of it. They wouldn't burn no one like about 2-3 feet deep.
I buried a lot of drum back there in the place they call the Pecan Orchard. Back there in the southeast side of the site. They had one guy down there told me not to let none of that stuff get on me, but he still didn't tell me what it was all about.
I don't know what was in the drum, and don't know what was in the dirt, because we were filling in with it.
There were materials in the storage tanks that I was to dismantle. It was liquid, but it wasn't water. Mr. Alexander opened the valve and let it pour out on the ground. Deposition of George Bird, November 18, 1986.
In March 1984, the Mississippi Department of Natural Resources, Bureau of Pollution Control, joined with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency to sample Columbia City's water wells. Late that year, the site, now officially called the Newsom Brothers Old Reichhold site, was proposed to the EPA National Priorities List of the Superfund for cleanup. EPA performed an emergency removal of over 655-gallon drums. In 1986, the Reichhold site was proposed for final listing on the Superfund's National Priorities List. Testing of sediments in the 4 ponds on the site revealed a virtual chemical soup of toxic contaminants, including the ingredients for the herbicide Agent Orange. EPA conducted a second removal action from November 1987 to February 1988, removing 1,920 tons of contaminated soil and 3,900 empty and partially filled barrels. In 1994, EPA was preparing to delist the Reichhold site from the Superfund National Priorities List when the remains of about 100 drums were discovered in the area of the North Pond. Samples from the North Pond revealed the presence of benzene, toluene, ethylbenzene, Xylenes, and PCP in the groundwater.
The site is not cleaned because of the North Pond of the site. They have a fence within a fence. They have found or discovered 100 barrels, they said, or more. We cannot really tell because they only state to us the numbers that they want to give out. And if the barrels have actually rusted, it is difficult for anyone to detect the amount of barrels.
EPA proposed to address the North Pond area of contamination in a separate record of decision for what the agency called Operable Unit 2. This decision will close the books on the principal Reichhold site, allowing it to be declared clean. It will be as clean a piece of property as we have anywhere in this country. EPA spokeswoman Betty Winter was quoted in the Hattiesburg American. But has the contamination been cleaned up?
There have been no discussion concerning addressing the off-site contamination by the Environmental Protection Agency or Reichhold Chemicals. I feel that basically they want to cover all of this up and just hope that the problem would just go away and the people would die out and go away as well.
We are
This videotape presents the untold story of the chemical poisoning of Columbia, Mississippi. Has the chemical contamination in Columbia been cleaned up? How sick are the residents who live next to the site? And how wide an area has been exposed to toxics? What is the truth? And Jesus' apostle wrote, "Those who live by the truth come to the light, so that it may be clearly seen that God is in all they do."
Running into the sewage.
Throughout the nearly 6-year-long cleanup process, Betty Mingo of Jesus People Against Pollution videotaped events from the other side of the fence.
From behind the orange fences, that is what you call the immediate hot spot, that is left open with nothing to cover it.
Stockpiles of excavated site soils from both Operable Unit 1 and Operable Unit 2 were left uncovered and open to the atmosphere. This was done twice, and the practice is not acceptable, especially since the stockpiles were directly upwind of the neighboring community. Dr. Catherine Hunanen, Human Health Risk Assessment.
See that tree up there? But they loading it up.
You can have sleep, you can breathe, and the window that's blowing your window, you had to close your window down, and you just cook. You couldn't call it cook, or you afraid the stuff would get in your pot. It's just been misery.
Just like the EPA and all says it don't affect you. There's no germs outside of there. You know, I don't believe them. I don't believe a word they say. Because you can't tell me that I just live at a cyclone fence. Is all that's separating my land from their land? And there's nothing on my land? I don't believe them, no.
Columbia firefighter Robert Holmes remembers that the ground on the site was so contaminated that oftentimes the dirt would actually catch fire.
Well, the ground would catch fire down underneath it. And it'd be just a crack, just a hairline crack on top of the ground, and there'd be smoke coming out of it. And then you start digging there, and there would be fire underneath it.
The sudden discovery of the previously unknown contamination at the North Pond in 1994, after nearly 6 years of EPA presence, raised questions about the competency of the entire cleanup process. Questions some cleanup workers had themselves.
I know they would go down and they would dig down so deep and so far, and they would haul dirt up there, and they was bringing it up there, and they was storing it up there. And they, all of a sudden, some guy looked at it and said, "Well, this is good now. This is good dirt." And none of those guys didn't work in no laboratory that I know of. They wasn't qualified to come and say, "Well, this area here is clean, or that area is clean."
I'd go down there and I never would say anything if there was meetings ahead of the high school. And the EPA would tell you where the barrels were buried at. And I sat out there and watched them at night, bury some. And they said never would come up with that site. And I told them, I said, "Y'all got a site that is not even on there." And they said there wasn't no site there, but the next day they dug up about 25 or 30 drums there.
And they take this EPA man around there, and they go around and let him see what they want him to see. He didn't go and pick no spot and just go where he wanted to see. Well, whatever they took him, there'd be 10 or 12 of them. Whatever way they would go around and take him, they just let him on around. And he just go wherever they took him.
No samples were analyzed for dioxins and furans at any off-site locations, and only surface soils, not sediments, were characterized in the Operable Unit 1 record of investigation. Dr. Catherine Hunanen, Human Health Risk Assessment.
The record of decision issued by EPA defines the Reichhold site as 81 acres in size. But maps and other information from 3 decades before show the site to be perhaps as many as 25 acres larger.
Well, they say that the site encompasses 81 acres. And in actuality, according to the maps from the 60s and the 50s, you will see that the site entails 105 acres.
We excavated sludgy, liquidy materials from the East Columbia apartments, which had a noxious odor and contained some garbage. 6 trucks hauled this sludge for 2 to 3 days. Statement by Handy Willis, a private contractor for Wallace Construction, June 10, 1993.
The 20-plus acres that are not included in the EPA Record of Decision now are the site of private homes and the East Columbia apartment complex.
These are apartments that was built after the March 1977 major gas explosion. They built these elderly and handicapped apartments in the early 80s, in 1981 or 82, somewhere in that time frame. Some of them, when they came into the complexes, come in walking. And when they leave out, they either leave out on a stretcher, dead, or they wind up with major health problems in the process.
Residents of the neighborhoods that surround the Reichhold Superfund site all have their stories of illness and death. The story of the Robert Holmes family is typical.
And I got a daughter, she's 24, and she's been sick ever since she's been here. But since she moved away, about 2 years after she moved away, she started getting better. And I got a daughter in North Carolina. Her nose bled the whole time we lived here. And I reckon it was 2 or 3 years after she moved away, her nose don't hardly ever bleed anymore. Well, I got a son, he's 19, he's been ill ever since he's been born, raised here, he's been ill.
This is how we used to get over there and play in the field when I was real little. I was like in kindergarten. It was like in '83. And it's grown up kind of a bit, but right over there in the corner there's a fence, and you could pull it up and crawl underneath it. It's still like it. They never did fix it. And we would climb through there, or sometimes go through the drainage pipe, and you could get over there in that field. And we used to play baseball, soccer, and all that stuff. Kickball. We played all kinds of games over there.
Ball, big bird. Let's go.
There we go.
This is the Duckworth Community Park for our Webb Quarter community. This park is housing what we call the Jingling Creek. Jingling Creek now no longer have waters that run down in the middle of this park as it once have when I was a young child. They rerouted the waters since JPEP have actually formed and begin to deal with the contamination in the water supply.
Down here at this here park, my kids and other kids used to go down there and swim, and they went to breaking out with soda and stuff, and we thought it was from them throwing in the water, you know, but shortly after that, they found out that the kids were breaking out. They come down and brought a dozer and stuff down there and covered that thing up. And they didn't tell us anything, why they covered it up or nothing.
They closed the swimming pool down because a lot of the complaints that the people was having concerning their children's sicknesses. We had a lot of children, such as myself as one, breaking out with a lot of skin rashes, having abnormal bleeding problems, having a lot of headaches, kidney problems.
The residents living in the neighborhood surrounding the Reichhold site were exposed from runoff and flooding during times of heavy rain.
It floods, it gets up, and then when it started going down, they could make mosquitoes. They came down here and looked at it. That's all. They came over there and looked at it. And they were talking about they had to see somebody about putting a sewage line, putting a drainage through there, but they ain't been back.
This whole land was covered with water. And then they tell me nothing come over here. I'm old, I know good and well it's not healthy.
We used to have a little garden in the backyard back there. And we had our hose down there, and when that flood come, 3 of our hose died. I guess they must have trucked their water or something.
3 surveys of symptoms and illnesses of Columbia residents living within the vicinity of the Reichhold site support the anecdotal evidence presented by individuals. In the first study of 65 individuals, 70.8% of responders reported frequent headaches, 76.9% reported recurrent skin rashes, and half of the responders reported problems associated with their kidneys.
Everybody down this street's been affected. I got a daughter that lives in this trailer over here, has headaches all the time. And her little boy's having headaches. See, he was born over there.
In the second survey of 432 individuals who attended a public meeting in Columbia in 1993, there was also reported high frequencies of headaches and skin rashes.
I know they have quite a few people in this neighborhood died, you know, then just dying all of a sudden, so they come up with something, and I see that have something to do with it.
A third survey by ATSDR, in cooperation with the state of Mississippi, of the prevalence of symptoms and diseases, again documented higher levels of rashes, watery or burning eyes, headaches, dizziness, but concluded that the increase was not statistically significant.
ATSDR concluded that the survey was not adequate, so the results were meaningless. This blatant disregard for the value of this data, given the large number of carcinogens in the site wastes and the large quantity of these wastes, is incomprehensible. Dr. Catherine Huternan, Human Health Risk Assessment.
Nationwide, ATSDR finds less than 2% of residents around Superfund sites have health problems with a slight correlation to the presence of toxic chemicals. And ATSDR has never acknowledged health problems directly related to the presence of a Superfund site. This pattern continues in Columbia. In spite of evidence of health problems, the government does not know whether or how neighbors of the Reichhold site have been affected by chemical exposure because it hasn't studied the problem. There is other evidence that toxic materials have escaped the Reichhold site. In 1976, the Mississippi Air and Water Pollution Control Commission fined Reichhold Chemical for discharging wastewater containing phenols, oil, and grease into a nearby stream without a permit. The stream was Jingling Creek. Several miles downstream, Jules Rateau raised cattle.
Well, we started losing cattle getting sick, having calves that were deformed. We traced it back to Reichhold Chemical. That was the, it's been some time ago, Mr. Bates, who was with the Poison Control Unit out of Jackson, traced the flow of the stream coming in here back to Reichhold Chemical.
A cattle kill had occurred in this area, but the Operable Unit 1 record of investigation failed to consider this event as an indication of off-site migration of site wastes. Dr. Catherine Huternan, Human Health Risk Assessment.
2 investigations of reports of off-site contamination from the Reichhold site were prepared in the early 1990s. The first investigation was conducted by the Malcolm Perney firm, an engineering company that worked for Reichhold. 5 sites, termed areas of inquiry, were investigated. Malcolm Perney concluded that there was not a contamination problem that could have been caused by Reichhold at any of these sites. A second investigation, conducted by a Texas engineering firm called P.E. Lamoureux and Associates, looked at 10 sites of potential off-site contamination. 3 of the 10 were included in the Malcolm Perney list. This study, which was commissioned by the O'Quinn law firm in Texas, is sealed as a result of a court settlement with Reichhold.
All down through here, them drums is dumped.
But the people who live and work in Columbia know a great deal about the dumping of chemicals and other waste from the Reichhold facility.
That drum, let him take the picture of that drum.
An old curve in the Pearl River, now a backwater called an oxbow, backs right against the city of Columbia. William Brown, working for the George Bird Bulldozer Company, helped bury waste from the Reichhold site all over Columbia, including in the old oxbow.
We buried some of them drums right here. Right down there. Oh, they dumped some up the road here. right behind that woman's house up here.
They dump all back there. And then I used to dig baits and them old drums, I dig them up. And for the last 20 years, it's something been stinking around here, can't stay upstairs, they come all through the house.
It was just enough room for a truck to come through here, and we started from right there on that lower end. As we haul in here, we'd always fill and keep coming around, coming around. We put them all up and down this thing, all over yonder old man Key's house.
The old Columbia City dump was another site where chemicals from Reichhold were dumped, according to former George Bird Company worker William Brown. Located along the banks of the Pearl River, material dumped here flowed almost directly into the river's waters.
We buried it down there where the old Winn-Dix is. We buried it up above the old Winn-Dix up there, and we buried it right here. We buried it up the road there a little piece, and we buried it up another place up the road there a little piece. That's right. And we have buried it up yonder what used to be the old city dump behind the slaughterhouse there. We have buried it there.
All right, they got the dump. You go down this road here, and then they got them buried back down into, and they got a little old creek back here, and I know that chemical probably went down in the ground and got in that water and went on downstream.
In 1986, the city of Columbia opened a new dump next to Foxworth, Mississippi. Located on the other side of the Pearl River, this dump received waste from the Reichhold site. Former Columbia City worker Robert Thompson remembers the waste disposal process.
Brought them over here on 18-wheeler trucks from the Reichhold plant. And I didn't pay the name, no attention on the trucks. I just know they hauled it over here and dumped it over here. Dumped it over in that hole over there. Dug a hole and dumped it in right up on the hill. It was some kind of old chemical. And then they brought some drums over here from the Reichhold and buried up there. It was chemical in them.
Buried beneath the man-made hills of this new Columbia City dump are other chemicals, including some, according to Robert Thompson, that did not come from the Reichhold site.
They hauled a bunch of it from this place over here, and then they hauled a lot out of Louisiana. The last they hauled come from Louisiana, but it's the same stuff. That's the one that's buried over here by them trees over here. They were paying them to take it. They wasn't costing them, you know, ain't nobody gonna let you dump that stuff on their land. So you know they paid to get a city some kind of hand out to dump it over here. They keep your mouth shut, didn't want nobody to know it's over here.
Workers with direct knowledge of illegal off-site dumping were not encouraged by local officials to tell their story.
They said if we talked about it, we lose our job. If we said anything about it, we lose our job. We lost them anyway, so we might well have talked about it.
But I've worked all my life. When you run your mouth too much and talk too much and know too much to the wrong people, you're looking for something else to do.
The political structure have joined force with the chemical company to declare chemical warfare on the people here and to basically suppress the issue.
10 years after the cleanup of the Reichhold site began, the poisoning and destruction of the lives of the people living in Columbia continues. Jesus People Against Pollution has fought back in an effort to reveal the truth, to let people's stories be heard, to bring justice to people who are sick, exploited, and dying. It is time to make it right. It is time for justice.
Well, they need to do something about this. That would make it right. You know, tell us something, you know. They got all the funds, they got the equipment, they need to do something.
I think they should be made by this land. It's no good to anybody. Nobody else wants it. And when I die out, the children won't have any use for it because it's no good.
Buy us out and put us in a nice, clean neighborhood where we can have a little peace and comfort and won't be scared to make a garden. We don't even make a garden no more.
The goals of JPAP is for these people to get relocation, lifetime health benefits, equal and just compensation and a thorough investigation into this mess that they call a cleanup.
Jesus, hold my hand while I run this race. Jesus, hold my